Footy fans, we're back. Alrighty, reviewing everything round 9 in Footy Rants this week. We have to stretch ourselves back to Thursday between the Broncos and Penrith, where we saw the Bronx come away victors 32-18. Obviously, the scoreboard looked a little bit better than it could have for Penrith at one stage there. We go right back to that first 5 minutes and Bronx fans, I tell you what, some of those close games, you're getting away with those video ref calls. I'm just going to say it. It's the refs on your side. Whatever's happening off the field, the refs are liking it and you're getting the rub of the green. So, but nah, all jokes aside, Penrith, again, well below par. Been saying it week after week. The forwards are slowly getting better. There was a lot more of a cohesive effort, but I think the stats sort of read that way more to the back end of the game. You go to that first, we will just touch on the video ref call there with respect to the ball getting knocked out. Yes, I think the onus is on Wallace to hold the ball, and he did drop the ball, but it went backwards, so that's play on. So it doesn't matter whether or not it was played at, not played at. The direction of the ball has gone away from the attacking team's goal line. Therefore, that should be play on. So I'd like to see whether what other views there are on top of that, and whether you just think it was a knock on. In my opinion, it was a blatant knock back. And if Penrith are first to score there, hell, who knows? 32-18, I doubt it, because from there the Bronx held all possession and just got through their sets essentially and just drowned out the Penrith forward pack in starvation of the footy. And we have a look at some of the stats. So overall completions 89% to Penrith 62. You're not going to win too many fucking games with a 62% completion rate. If we want to have a look at one, Cronulla were a team who were able to do that this week, but we'll get to that later. Otherwise, I think a couple of words that you could use to describe Penrith were missed opportunities. Still outclassed Brisbane 21-5 in the offloads. Missed tackles, the Broncos clocking up a whopping 51 in comparison to Penrith 36, and penalties conceded, Broncos 7-3. So you can't say that Penrith didn't have their opportunities, and I think there was a little while there. You take off that last try to Gillett right on full time, and it's 26-18. They definitely had opportunities there had they struck a little earlier to win it, in my opinion. That try that Roberts scored, I think, was evidence of where his talent lies. There's not too many players that can score a try like that, and you can't coach speed, in my opinion. There's some people that either just have it or you don't. So the Bronx will miss Roberts in that sense. I've seen him go off in that second half with that ankle injury after that collision with Gillett. So you'd expect probably Jordan Kahu to slot into the centres, and David Mead will probably come into that wing, I dare say, is the safest way to continue involving that playing group that has been used. And if Bennett's to continue the outside back off the bench, you'd probably think he'd just go with Jonas Pearson if he's already got that opportunity this year. It was really good to see the battle of the middle between Josh Maguire and Trent Merrin. I thought that was one of Trent Merrin's better games of the year, and it was good to see him, being selected in that Australian team, step up to the plate and say, hey, look, I do deserve my spot. But I think what was even better was that even though he did play such a good game, Maguire went up and above again. And I thought Maguire actually played better than Merrin, even though Merrin was a star. I think the big tide came, even though they left their run really, really late, it just showed if you stick to structure to a certain extent, all this flair and finesse and all that sort of bullshit sort of just becomes renege. Like, you need to get to a certain point to earn a right. And as soon as they realised the two halves that they were playing against in Milford and Nikorima, and that they're two of probably the weaker defensive half combinations in the competition at the moment, that's when they started having all their success. They got to an edge, isolated the halves, and started fucking just tearing meters up. In total, the halves pairing missed a combined total of 12 tackles. So that just goes to show where all of, the 21 offloads, all the missed tackles, and the penalties conceded, that just come off the back of momentum to hitting their points left and right, moving half to half, and then allowing the forwards to play off the back of that, and then going to your outside backs, not the other way around like they had been. You've seen all the space that was afforded to Moylan once he started getting his hands on the footy towards the back end of that second half. And they isolated Sam Thaiday on a couple of occasions. He's in a bit of a form slump at the moment, and they just got out enthused a little bit by some of the younger kids. Regan Campbell-Gillard, I think, was massive for them again. I've got massive raps. I'm keeping an eye on him. Probably Campbell-Gillard and Adam Elliott from the Bulldogs are two of the young forwards that I'm enjoying watching most in the NRL at the moment. It's so good to see this next wave of kids coming through. And Angus Crichton from the Rabbitohs. They're probably my big three at the moment. They're really turning it on. I mean, just back rowers in general. I think it's such a good time. You see blokes like Gillett and Cordner leading the way, but then you've even got Corey Harawira-Naira who's burst onto the scene. There's just so much potential on those fringes for big bodies and blokes who run genuine good lines. So again, I think the result was warranted. Penrith sort of played out how I expected them to play. It doesn't appear that they've really been changing anything, or perhaps that is the problem. Like I've mentioned a few times, they've been switching players, Pichi Hiku and a few of those reserve forwards. They've been switching them around a little bit too much, so that there hasn't been that cohesive ability for that team to move forward. And I think once they settle on that, they'll get a bit of a chance to breathe. Like they've got the Warriors after rep round this weekend. They're coming in with a whole heap of confidence now. Yes, they're only 1 from 3, but they've played some really good outfits in the Roosters, Storm, and Warrior and Raiders. Sorry, and have been pretty unlucky. They were right in that in all 3 games. So they could easily be coming off the back of 3 wins. The big plus for them is that they're playing in front of their home crowd at Pepper Stadium. So that they'll want to get a win on the board. They just need to. But with the Warriors playing the way they are, and we'll get to some of the big positives that came out of their game on the weekend, good luck is all I've got to say to Penrith. It could just go from bad to worse. As for the Bronx, another good win in front of the home crowd. I'm pretty sure they've got Manly at their next home game. I could be wrong off that. What do we got? Yeah, Manly in the doubleheader at Suncorp in a fortnight's time. So, some interesting matchups there. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward. Manly's coming off the back of 2 good wins as well now. But yeah, all will be revealed on a big night for the Queensland fans with the Storm coming up and as well as the Titans. Into our second match. The Rabbitohs and Manly, well, this game was all over after about 30 minutes. They just ran rampant. Marty Tapau was an absolute freak for Manly. Here's a stat for you. He averaged a hit up every 2 minutes for a total of 229 running metres. Good luck. That bloke was just a man possessed and one who was really keen to stand up. You can tell he really loves that challenge when he comes up against the Burgess brothers. And that was really, really evident, and they won that battle. Brenton Lawrence again was strong, scoring that first try and really pushing his claim to play some representative football. So I was happy to see him continue on his good run of form. And I think where most of the stability came from, to be honest, was Blake Green and DCE really forming that strong groove as that halves pairing, and probably the most in-form new halves pairing, only second to Pearson, Keary, in my opinion. The big game changer, you've seen the Rabbitohs with all the ball early on. DCE gets that 40-20, and the rest is history. And that was evident earlier in the year. It's such a key asset when they played the Cowboys up in Townsville. They were under the pump, survived, got out, early kick, noticed that the winger fullback aren't back. And yeah, that shoe on Daly Cherry Evans is something to marvel at. There's not too many blokes in the game who have a long kicking game as accurate as Daly. So yeah, that ultimately sealed the deal and got them running. and pushing that sort of momentum, as we were alluding to, that Penrith is sort of lacking at the moment. When you've got forwards like Marty Tapau, like Brendan Lawrence, like Jake Trbojevic getting you on the front foot, you can allow players like your Dylan Walkers, who are very much momentum-based players. They need things going their way. When things aren't going their way, they're fucking kicking cans and they don't really want to be out there, and they'll go missing really, really quick. But when things are going your way, they're the sort of players that you want on your side. And for Manly that night, that was Dylan Walker. He was, leading in from the preview in the last podcast, even though I expected the Rabbitohs to win, I said one area that they may struggle with was that inexperience in that outside backs. And, Talakai, Jennings, Heimel Hunt, they ultimately were the difference, because Dylan Walker just had his way, and Uate had his biggest hit out with 4 tries. I think it had been something like 6 years since I think it was 2011 when he was playing for the Knights that he last scored 4 tries in a game. So, it's good. It's good to see players come back and get second wins in their career. We've seen when he was at the height of his game, he was playing at both of the highest levels, for New South Wales and Australia, and doing so very, very well. So, I do enjoy seeing blokes making their claim and moving positively forward at a new club, rather than becoming the has-beens that some players unfortunately do. Not only whether they stay at their beloved club, or if they do move on to another club, which is, I guess, why in some way I do hope that Cooper Cronk does retire at the end of the year. I think it would be a shame. I don't think he has anything to prove to the game, to the supporters, and more importantly, the teams that are on the radar that could afford him. I'm not sure if there's enough of a base there already for him to build off to get any sort of immediate success. Yes, he would definitely make a difference and would better that side, but whether it's going to be anything that gives him a return of value, I don't think there's anything high enough on the market at the moment. And yeah, I hope he sails off into the sunset a legend, and potentially, the way the Storm are going at the moment, they're still not playing their best football and are out in front on top of the ladder. So, to send him out a winner would be something special. Another area where the Bunnies really struggled, and where I thought was going to be a massive, massive plus for them, was their short kicking game. That was going to come through Reynolds and Farah once he came off the bench. I thought he would have been that difference, and they disappointed. They just didn't execute. So, when you need to control the controllables and you haven't done so as effectively as you could have, you can't really blame anything else. You can't go looking left and right, looking at referee decisions and stuff like that. There's nowhere that you can hide behind a 46-8 scoreline. So, unfortunately, it's back to the drawing board for the Rabbitohs, and I'm not sure if there is anything really that you try and pick apart that could have changed anything. It's just one of those performances that you're probably better off just not talking about anymore, and focusing on getting the week off, freshen the bodies up. And they've got the Tigers at ANZ Stadium in a fortnight's time. So, yeah, look, both pretty desperate teams. Tigers probably in a little bit better form, but the Bunnies in all sorts at the moment. There's some changes probably have to be made in that forward pack. I'm not sure whether Kyle Turner's handling the week in, week out physicality of playing in the front row. I'll say it again, I don't think Jason Clark's really up to the standard anymore. And, between Burgess and Turner, I think they had 12 missed tackles between them as well. And, in the middle, that you need to be tight. So that stat of 12 missed tackles versus the meters that Trbojevic and Marty Tapau were able to gain it's completely correlated. So, yeah, some changes need to be made there, and still missing George Burgess through suspension. They're going to be licking wounds, so I would imagine there'll be a few blokes, fingers crossed, Chero will get another opportunity there. The next game, well, there was a lot of hype and build up around this game as to whether or not Jonathan Thurston would front up for the Cowboys, and unfortunately for me as a Cowboys supporter, it wasn't to be there. That he decided that it wasn't at a point where he felt confident enough to come back, and we'll soon see whether or not it is better again this week as to whether he pulls an Australian jersey on. From a fan's point of view, and that's been echoed from Coach Paul Green, he's sort of hoping that JT doesn't play just because of the risk factor of it. It's an interesting moral dilemma. You want to try and take every opportunity that you can to play at that high level and represent your country, but at the same time, I think you look more fondly back on premiership wins than you ever will games played for your country. Just some of the things that I did discuss in the last podcast, that the international game just doesn't hold the prestige of any other code like your rugby does. Just because we don't play it, we don't put that sort of emphasis on it to stop any sort of domestic competition. We're only just now starting to create this rep round type nature of isolating the representative weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and whether there does become more momentum is gained off the back of this, letting some of the Pacific Island nations get their opportunities to showcase their talent during the year. And I think by cancelling all domestic forms of the game, you're going to get people watching those games more. So I think that is the clever move moving forward, is to isolate that weekend. But yeah, without getting sidetracked, moving back into the Cowboys and Parramatta game, we sort of said it was probably going to go either way. If JT was there, does he help that provide that steady hand for the Cowboys as far as their completions, a short kicking game, which he's renowned for? And without it, the stability wasn't there. We've seen straight off the bat, John Asiata puts that one out on the full. Michael Morgan again sort of struggling for that consistency. He was a little bit hot and cold, got on little runs and got a few good kicks away repeat sets, but then, there'd be the odd stray one off the side of the boot. And I guess the shining light for the Cowboys was Kalen Ponga. I gave him a fair spray last week after all the hype that was surrounding him, essentially falling over for 2 easy tries. It was good to see him roll up the sleeves and get through some tough stuff. Seeing him in broken play there and showcasing what abilities he does have with his footwork and that return out of the in goal to absolutely cut Semi Radradra in half was something beautiful to watch, and it's definitely glad to see him in a Cowboys jersey doing that. But more importantly, when he pulled up a little bit lame after that half break with that calf, and you could see it was clearly troubling him, whether it just kept locking up on him or whether there is some sort of pre-existing sort of injury there, it was good to see him not shy away from it. I mean, yeah, he was sort of limping and carrying on a little bit at some points in the game, but he always found his way back into the game and never let anyone down. And I thought his returns were a lot better. He was a lot more physical, and just that urgency around trying to get those quick play the balls when you're coming out of trouble, especially when you're on the back of a 26-6 scoreline. You need to be doing everything that you can to help your forward so they don't have to retreat as far back to get those carries. So yeah, we've sort of already ticked a few of the notes that I've made here off. The fifth tackle options for the Cowboys were obviously what devastated them, and once Parramatta started to dominate that possession, the forwards were just never able to mount any sort of pressure and momentum, and that's what got them over the line last week against Newcastle. Was the stat leaders in Bolton, Tamalolo, Hess, Cooper, Ethan Lowe. They were kept very, very quiet. Even Tamalolo was kept very, very quiet during the game. And when you've got the Parramatta forwards getting on a roll like that, it makes it hard for the forwards to get in the game. So that's where that sort of trade, we've spoken about it with Penrith. The forwards aren't getting that forward roll on to get the backs to do what you want on their edges later in the game. But at the same time, if your back three aren't working hard enough for you out of trouble, you're never able to build that momentum as a forward. So it's sort of this, what came first, the chicken or the egg sort of scenario. And for Parramatta, it was evident. The forwards just rolled their sleeves up and got the job done. Every forward made at least 100 metres, I think, bar Manumau, who was just under, like 3 metres under or something like that. But a special mention to Vave, the former Manly Sea Eagle, in 27 minutes ran for 127 metres and 16 tackles. If that's not work rate, I don't know what is for a big man like that. And, just other notable mentions. Nathan Brown has been good. He's definitely cemented that starting spot for Coach Brad Arthur, and is doing a great job. And that allows blokes like Norman and Gutherson to really amp up their running game, which they're so good at doing. We saw Gutherson just on the end of two good short side plays from Norman, and he picked up a double. And Will Smith on debut for Parramatta, coming from Penrith, scored a try, was very, very solid. And he'll more than likely keep his spot there until Bevan French comes back. I don't think he's expected back until about round 12. So, yeah, expect Smith to get a few more games there. Although Jeff Robson is back next round, so it'll be interesting to see which way they go. I think the up-tempo nature of which Norman Smith and Gutherson offer through that spine, as well as Kaiser Pritchard, who's really finding his feet in the NRL, and the speed of that game and the expectation of a NRL hooker is really evident. And I think you can really utilise that fast spine to get on the outside of your sixes and sevens in the opposing teams. And if you're getting those edge back rollers into legs tackles and getting those quick play the balls, you can really, really isolate some of your key edge back rowers to get those one-on-ones on the opposing opposition halves. So yeah, I'd expect them to try and keep playing that up-tempo style footy with those smaller, more nimble halves. So yeah, I don't think there's too much more to really comment on that. Parramatta just out-enthused them. Again, it was something that I was calling on the Cowboys to demonstrate, was just to have more fun, just to enjoy the game. It was something watching Parramatta play Penrith the week before leading into this game, was it just looked like they were having fun, especially Kenny Edwards, although it was a shame to see him, carry on and get a bit over-enthused there and let that stray slap go. But it was good to see the referees pull the trigger and say, look, this is the precedent that's been set. It's no longer going to happen. So at least now we know that anyone who does toss up that sort of behaviour is not going to be tolerated, and then they can expect to be sat on the sideline. So I wouldn't anticipate anyone slapping any other players or anything, or even trying anything remotely left or right of a punch. So yeah, I think that's pretty well set the precedent, and I wouldn't expect to see any more this year. The next game, Titans and Knights. Although the scoreboard reads demolition, I think it more so illustrated what we've come to expect of the Knights, that just lack of an 80-minute performance. Again, that forward pack's just really struggling to get any sort of go forward. 7 of their 10 forwards ran for less than 50 metres, which is just unacceptable at that level. You need more momentum. You can't just rely on the Saifidi brothers to get you going. Because it took 23 minutes for the Titans to even get points on the board, and to defend that last play right on the hooter to give them a 2-point advantage going into halftime should have filled them with a bit of confidence, and that they just need to dig their heels in. But poor defensive reads on someone like LG, who loves to take on the line at the start of the second half and give away such a simple try. It just led to pretty much what we've seen in every game prior to this one, was just that weight of possession. And when you've got a team that's full of legs that are inexperienced on playing long minutes at the NRL level, you need to hold the footy as much as you possibly can. And, when you're on the end of a 14-2 offload count and a 30 to 15 missed tackle count, you're not going to be winning very many games. And that was evident as to why the score blew out like it did. Their obvious go-to for the Knights, and someone who has been standing up for them week in, week out, has been Dane Gagai, but he was kept immensely quiet. And I thought that was a really gutsy call by Coach Neil Henry to put Hayne in the centres and back the guys that had been there whilst he'd been injured. and keep LG and Ash Taylor in the halves. I think it was a call that needed to be made, because if they're to build that club culture around those two young halves, you need them to be playing as much first grade together as possible. There's no use separating them just because you're trying to fit a talent pool into one team. And to identify the fact that you could man Jared Hayne up against their most informed player in Dane Gagai, I think it was evident long term that was the right call. And if anything, even though Gagai was kept quiet, I think it's only going to bring more and more out of Dane. It was a shame to see Hayne score such a soft try to tee things off with just that, wouldn't even really call it a quick tap. It was just more lack of urgency from the Knights to be aware of the rules. And the rest is history, essentially. 32-0 second half. It was just sheer possession. I guess any sort of notable mentions would be to the bench players for the Gold Coast in Vaivai Pulu and Boyle, all running for 100 metres off the bench. When you've got that sort of energy coming off the bench on top of an already struggling forward pack, that's just laying a great platform for the talent on the edges that you've got in Hayne and Conrad Hurrell. So, yeah, to be... it was probably a result that we all expected of the talent that the Titans do possess now, even despite the mounting injury list that they do hold. That 38-8 scoreline is probably something that we expected. Probably the only negative you take out of it is they need to be playing for more than just one half of footy. Yes, they started to get back in the arm wrestle, but 23 minutes to sort of get on top. We see what teams like Manly and the Melbourne Storm are capable of doing in the opening 23 minutes. If you're coming into crunch games against teams like that, don't expect to get back in an arm wrestle and go out and win 38-8. You'll be clawing on to even stay in the game if that's the case. So, whilst it is pleasing to see them bounce back after losing to the Knights earlier in the year, I wouldn't read too much into the 38-8 scoreline. The fact that it took them a while to get going, still plenty to work on, and they actually, funnily enough, are coming up against the Melbourne Storm in their next match. So, will be interesting to. I think it'll be a good gauge to see where they actually are at. Into the second game for Saturday night, we had it was probably my second favourite game. The Warriors game for mine was the pick of the round, but it was good to see the Bulldogs stand up in the face of adversity. As I said, I had no idea why I thought they would beat the Raiders, but I just had an inkling. Had you asked me the same question at half time, I would have said not a hope in hell. Especially, obviously losing Graham and Reynolds, who are the absolute backbone of a club and just are an example of everything that they stand for as a club culture and that dogs of war mentality. So once those two players were injured, others needed to pick up the slack, especially in the middle, because when you're coming up against a forward pack as big and formidable as the Raiders, you need as much go forward as you can coming out of trouble. And for the Bulldogs, it was Tolman and Clemmer, and they did just that, running for 203 metres and 185 metres respectively. Jackson was also outstanding with 39 tackles. He continues just to be, he just makes great defensive reads, and that just gives your halves who are defending outside him just that extra air of confidence, which then leads into your centre and your wing. So that just helps ease the pressure when he's there to make those reads and build that confidence from the inside moving out. It was just a good old-fashioned tough game of footy early on. Adam Elliott just running good line. Again, another, like I said earlier, one of my favourite young up-and-coming forwards that I enjoy watching at the moment, and he ended up picking up a double, which was good to see, and I think now he's all but cemented his place in that starting lineup. Eastwood, with a poor defensive read, lets in one of the Bulldogs one of the Raiders tries. I can't see him working his way back into the starting side. But really, where all the damage was done was on that Raiders right side defence. After Reynolds was injured and Frawley was the mainstay half, him and Mbai actually paired up really, really nicely. And it'll be interesting to see now with Reynolds out how that combination starts to evolve and what they end up deciding to do with Leisha, whether they try and get more minutes out of him and whether they bring another 9 into that lineup. It'll be interesting. But what they did really well in execution was Frawley's ability to square up that defence. So pull off the footy first to get some defenders coming at him, square back up, hold that defender there so they're not just going to slide, and then that also stops that overs motion for your outside runners. But then he'd give that tip to Mbai, so half-to-half passing, which is sort of, I guess, become a bit of a rarity in the game now. You have a lot of traditional left side, right side halves, whereas you're seeing these halves now link up, and Mbai being the smaller, more nimbler type of bloke, coming off the back of that squared pass, is able to skip out off his defender and create a one-on-one with his edge back rower or centres on the half. So for a lot of times, it was just a simple case of picking the right pass after a poor defensive read, but ultimately isolating Adam Elliott on Blake Austin. And, Austin's one-on-one defence, he'll be copping a fucking spray for that this week in video, no doubt. But yeah, it was really interesting to see that combination. Obviously, since Frawley's come into the team, Mbai normally goes to 9, so we haven't really seen that. And what happens is normally you see Reynolds sort of just get that sideways running going, probe, and more often than not, he'll bring someone like a Branko Lee or a Morris brother under. And that was, it's not as effective when you don't have that early square up. So yeah, it was good to see that utilization of the half-to-half passing and allowing Mbai to create that footwork, and then ultimately, just pick whether he plays to Adam Elliott short or whether he brings Morris underneath, which saw the eventual winning try being scored. And it's just good to see a good old-fashioned Bulldogs win. It was a real traditional Bulldogs win. That eventual match-winning try was scored with still 20 minutes to go. And then it was just an arm wrestle from there, a survival of the fittest type scenario. And they came out on top. There's plenty of injuries, obviously, with Reynolds out, and even Boyd, unfortunately, now missing out on his spot in the Australian team after succumbing to injury. But yeah, I think that could be the win that just kickstart the Bulldogs form moving ahead now. And their next game, just bear with me, is against North Queensland in Sydney. So that'll be Jonathan Thurston's first game back, we all assume. Well and truly, they could potentially have Granville and Coote all coming back, so they'll need to be on the ready. But it'll be interesting to see how Mbai and Frawley pair up now, because you'd expect that'll be who they go with moving forward. Moving into the last game for Super Saturday was the Tigers and Sharks. I guess in one aspect you look at it being a gutsy win at Leichhardt, the home and heart of the Tigers. The Sharks went on and won 22-16. But then you look at some of the refereeing decisions. I think any rugby league fan looks at that and goes, Gallen deserves a Golden Globe for that performance. If you think someone that big's falling over from a jersey grab and that actually had any effect on the play, I think you're kidding yourself, to be honest. Another ruling, which I'm not sure some of you may or may not have noticed, but leading into the Sasaya Feki try, Ricky Latelli jumped on a ball in the play the ball and was able to retrieve possession because there wasn't a dummy half there for the Tigers. Now, as far as I understand, because I've seen it ruled on earlier in the year, and if you're in that middle third of the field, it's pretty rare for a defender to be able to jump on a ball and not get penalised. So the last I heard, the interpretation of that rule is the defender can take the ball, but they're not allowed to dive on it. So if he just simply runs into the ruck and picks that up, it's play on. So to see it ruled that way previously in the season, and then have a team 5 metres out dive on the ball as the Tigers are coming out of trouble and it's play on, That's when the frustration from fans come into play. Me personally, I have no problem. If you don't have a fucking dummy half there and they dive on it, sweet, go for it. But if you've ruled, and that's the precedent, and that's the way that the rule has been explained, that yes, you can take that ball, but you're not allowed to dive on it, and then we see someone do that and it leads to points, that's when coaches and fans get fucking pissed off. So, yeah, I was a bit dirty on a few of those decisions, and, you know, close games, teams need to win. Like I said, the Sharks hadn't gone back-to-back losses, Tigers hadn't gone back-to-back wins. One of those was going to have to give. And I guess it comes back to a case of if you are relying on 50-50 calls from referees to win you games, you're going to lose more games than not, in my opinion. So, yes, there were some shitty calls that went against the Tigers, but at the same time, don't put yourself in the position where you're relying on those calls to go your way in order to win games. And that's basically what the Sharks did. They capitalised on their opportunities. That was showcased most evidently when Tedesco wasn't at the back. Townsend identifies that. Beautiful short kick and retrieves it and scores himself. A beautiful show of individual brilliance that ultimately changed the game, won them the game. Some positives to take out of the game for the Tigers. I thought Nguama and Sully were really, really strong on that left edge. Jack Bird got found out a lot, actually, against a kid. He missed a total of 6 tackles, and that led to a fair few points, with Nguama and Sully both getting 4-pointers each. But, yeah, it just came back to the fact that the Sharks took their opportunities when they're on. Seeing Tony Williams return for the Sharks for the first time, it just shows you, I guess, a case of what could have been. You know, the ease in which he scored that try. You know, it was almost like he laughed and shrugged when he seen that he had to run over the top of Luke Brooks. And, you know, that's again another halves combination that, you know, if you can spot and isolate, you're gonna get points. You know, ultimately it's just going to be a matter of time. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty straightforward. It was unfortunate to see, I guess, as a Tigers fan, Woods get injured, Tedesco get injured, but you know, you just got to capitalise on your opportunities, and you can't leave games to be up to those 50-50 calls going your way. You know, argue with me, Tigers fans. Maybe you should have got the win, maybe you shouldn't, but yeah, in my opinion, if you're relying on those things, it goes the other way. You know, look at Brisbane. There's potentially a call there at the start of the game which shifts the momentum. They get it, but they push forward and they squash the game. So, you know, it's going to happen to you. You're going to win games that go against you as well. Moving into the last couple games, so Sunday matches. This was my favourite game. I was happy that I got this little tip right in the Warriors coming over the Roosters. There was just something about, I thought, the extra minutes that the Roosters had to play in a very, very physical match against the Dragons last week, and the proximity in which the Warriors got to the Storm, I think just gave them the confidence that they needed. You know, it was neck and neck pretty much the whole way. The only glaring stat which ultimately cost the Roosters the game where they were on the wrong end of a 7-2 penalty count. And, you know, they did lose that game to a penalty conversion late in the game, which ruled that Mitchell Pearce was offside. And, you know, hats off to Ashley Klein to have the balls to make that call. You know, knowing that Sean Johnson and his kicking ability in that sort of range, it was a penalty that was probably going to decide the game. So you could have quite easily just swept that under the rug and just be like, you know, that just doesn't happen. You don't give those penalties away at that time when it's 13-12 and see a game finish like that. And I guess in this case, it was a way that the crowd would have wanted to see the game finish with a Warriors win. I guess the biggest change for the Warriors was their defense, where we're so used to seeing them perform so well in attack. We all know that they can attack, but their defense was phenomenal. And that comes off the back of the Roosters forwards. They had 8 forwards that ran for over 100 metres in comparison to the Warriors 4. So that shows that even with the momentum, the desperation that they carried for their line was second to none. And I think that was most evident in that last-ditch effort when Boyd, for all money, was going to put Jake Friend away, tipped that ball probably a little bit too early, and then Tuivasa-Sheck still managed to turn inside out and make that tackle, and then the scramble came and everything was basically cleaned up and nullified. Other positives you take, the Roosters don't get that close without the intercept with Sean Kennydale off a stray Johnson pass. But yeah, it's sort of hung on those two plays. The Boyd mistake in sealing that deal, he probably almost dummies there and goes and scores in the corner himself. But being the unselfish player that he is, he probably just got a little bit freaked out. And I think there was even a player inside Friend who he could have potentially tipped to as well. So, hindsight's beautiful, but yeah, it was just good to see some grit. It's a term that you don't usually associate with the Warriors, grit. But for them to push forward and stake their claim, moving forward, coming up against who did we say earlier in the podcast that they've got it? Penrith. Penrith, they'll be full of confidence there, knowing that the sort of form, whilst they will be wary, I think now that the more and more games we're seeing Forum and Johnson, and the fact that they're going to be playing together in this test match, I think only adds value for the Warriors. The fact that players of that calibre aren't going to stop now. Sometimes we know, buys can come at the worst time for some clubs, and I think the Warriors are that sort of club who sometimes a break isn't what you want. Whereas, now a club like the Dragons, having come off the back of 2 losses after all the momentum they carried, they're probably happy to have a bit of a breather right now and rest some of those. We've seen Joel Thompson isn't going to be playing for Country this weekend. He just needs to rest. So, there's obviously a few sore bodies out there that are just ready for a refresh. But, yeah, really promising signs for Coach Kearney moving forward. For Robinson, I guess you sort of look at it like Ricky Stewart did the other week against Manly. You're going to win games like that, you're going to lose some. They were fortunate enough to be on the winning end of that last week. And I think it's something you've just got to be able to take in your stride as a mature coach. And he most definitely is, having so much success as he has had in such a short space of time. I'd expect them to bounce back, and it's a tantalising clash now that coming up against Parramatta in round 10. Them being on the back of this loss, albeit a close one. They've been on the back of 2 super physical matches, so to have a week off, I think, will benefit them as opposed to the momentum that Parramatta now feels that they have. So it'll be really interesting to see which way the cards fall in that next matchup. Moving into our final game before we wrap up today's podcast, we had the Storm and the Dragons. It was a fairly similar display for the Storm as that of a fortnight ago against Manly, where they shot off to an amazingly fast lead. Suliasi Vunivalu, what an absolute freak finisher that bloke is. The way he just, after he got injured and just came back, and it was like nothing. He didn't skip a beat, and it was just, yep, Kronk's there, I'm here. He's even off the back of a Slater kick for one of his tries, I think it was. If it wasn't, it was at Okar. So, again, they win off their back 3. They scored all 6 tries between the 3 of them. The only difference in that the Storm Dragons versus Storm Manly from a fortnight ago is really the kicking. We've seen Josh Dugan stand up last week and absolutely milk that goal to take it to extra time against the Roosters, and unfortunately only kicked it 20% on the weekend. So, he nails all those. It's 34-30. If Smith kicks the way he did against Manly, Dragons might get away with an absolute come-from-behind upset. So, yeah, you can look at it from both ways. The fact that you're competitive with the now top team in the Melbourne Storm without your absolute superstar of a half at the moment in Gareth Widdop, I think fills you with confidence. Moving ahead, they've got the Sharks. If I'm Mary McGregor, I'm not freaking out too much. It's definitely not panic stations. It's just more of a, okay, let's breathe. Let's look after our bodies over the next fortnight and come back ready for the local derby, because we all know how great the Dragon versus Cronulla games are. If I'm Bellamy, I'm still not 100% happy with the output of my team just yet. We're good in periods, but our missed tackles are still way too high. Some of the possessions just they didn't nullify the offloads like I said they needed to in that second half. They did so well at the start, but that was mainly because they were controlling so much possession. It wasn't so much that the defense was anything outstanding. They just starved the Dragons of the ball, got through their sets, and more often than not, they were scoring. Because at the end of the game, Dragons actually ran for a total of 400 metres more than the Storm. So that just shows you how much of a momentum shift there was. And there was also, I think I had a stat here. Nope, I didn't. Oh, yes, I did. Sorry. That the Dragons, they finished with a total of 16 offloads. So, that's not acceptable of a team standard that the Storm hold. Unfortunately, looking to the injury stakes for Storm, we see Christian Welch out for the year with an ACL injury. Unfortunate for the young fellow who had been starting to get some momentum now and starting to mature into a genuine NRL forward, as well as Nelson Asafa-Solomona was also out. So that sort of paves the way for Tohu Harris, and he made his return in a very, very dominant display by the Sunny Coast Falcons on the weekend over Tweed, winning 56-0. So, you would expect Harris and then probably either Vinny Lulawai or Tui Kamikamika to fill those two spots. Even an outside chance, who knows, we may see Brandon Smith get his opportunity at the NRL level. So he was Player of the Year last year for the North Queensland under-20s and was also their captain. He's also been picked in the 20-man squad for New Zealand this week. So, you wouldn't expect him to play. It's just there for the experience, and you'd have to think that he's going to take a hell of a lot out of that camp. And, he's going to be something for the future. He's an absolute bulldog. If you haven't seen any of his highlights, get on YouTube, get around it. Just quite a contrast. Very much fits the mold of, the dogged structure and go-forward mentality of a Melbourne Storm, but just comes with so much more aggression that Cameron Smith doesn't have in his game. So I think he's going to be absolutely damaging in the future, and having seen him play and dominate at an under-18s level when he was playing at Wynnum when I was coaching there, it's good to see him go on, get his opportunities and develop into someone that, we all know that player that is a could have been or a would have been or a should have been, but he's just an is. So, it's great to see that transition from a junior to a senior footy player come with so much success. So, champion, I wish you all the best, and I hope you do get a crack this year come Origin time, and I'm sure you'll be very much there, close to the mark. So, guys, that pretty much wraps up everything for this week. We'll do a preview for everything rep round, but at the moment we get to breathe and relax after 9 frantic rounds of rugby league. Probably the biggest surprises at the moment is definitely the Dragons, even coming off the back of 2 losses, and the biggest disappointment I'd have to say is probably Penrith. They're probably the team that I've harped on most because, like I've said, they're a young team, but I want them to succeed, and to see them lack, it's heartbreaking. You having a fan base like you do, who are so diehard in the West, like Penrith, you don't have too much time to beat around the bush before people start to get upset, and that trigger finger nature has to start to come out soon. So, look, I don't think Cartwright's the answer moving forward at 6. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, whether Martin does come back after that neck injury. But it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, guys, have a good week, and you shall hear from me on Thursday when we talk everything rep round. Friday Legends, peace out.